Hey guys, in today's video I wanted to show you how I crocheted myself a Mike Wazowski keychain. I know I mentioned in my Piglet video that that was going to be my new keyring, but I actually wanted to create something new, so I thought of this guy here. He's so adorable, and I didn't add any legs or arms because I felt like it would be a little bit too much, but I wanted to show you how it looks on my bag right now. So here is my bag, and this one has a little keyring here. I think he looks really adorable. I felt like if I did add the legs and the arms, it would just be way too much like on the bag here. And I just like how this looks. It's very small and cute. So if you're interested in making one of these, it's pretty simple. You mainly are working with a single crochet. You have a magic circle. You do have a couple tougher pieces in here because the horns are pretty small, but it's relatively simple and pretty fast to do. So if you're interested in making one of these, I'll let you know what you'll need in the next couple clips. I'll be using a crochet hook in the size 4mm. You will need 3 different colored yarn. First, I have this green one from Karen Simply Soft. This is in the color Limelight, and the weight is a 4. I will also be using a light blue for the hat and a cream colored yarn for the horns. I don't know the name of these because they are scrap pieces, but just make sure you have the same weight in yarn. I have white, black, and neon green felt for the eye, and blue felt for the hat. You will also need a threading needle, stitch marker, and embroidery thread. Lastly, you will need a hot glue gun, scissors, and stuffing. For round 1, we're going to take our green yarn and create a magic circle. So I'm just going to take my yarn here and wrap it around my fingers to create an X. Now I'm just going to take my hook and insert it inside the circle, take this yarn and pull it straight through. Now I'm just going to take my right hand and grab this side. With this yarn, I'm going to yarn over and pull through. So now you can just tighten this up. And then if you want to make the circle smaller, you'll just take the small piece of yarn and pull it, and it will be easier to work around. So next we're going to single crochet 6 times into our circle, and when you do your single crochet, you're working in the circle and this yarn as well. So I'm just going to take my hook, insert it inside the circle, grab this yarn, pull it through. I now have 2 loops, so I want to yarn over and pull through both of that. So that is a single crochet. Now I'm just going to do that 5 more times. So I'll show that once again, taking my hook inside the circle, yarn over, and pull through both. So I'll just do that 4 more times now. After you have 6 single crochets, you want to tighten up your circle, which I've already done. All you have to do is take this part of your yarn and pull it, and it will just close up any gaps you have. So to end off this round, and the only time you'll need to slip stitch is this first round. So all you have to do is just go straight into your first stitch, and you're going to pull the yarn all the way through. Just like that. And now you just need to take your stitch marker and insert it into that last stitch, and that is the end of round 1. For round 2, we're going to do an increasing round, so we're just going to single crochet 2 times into each stitch. So this is my first stitch. I'm going to do 1 single crochet and then another one into that same stitch. And I'll repeat that all the way through until I end up with 12 stitches in total for round 2. For the ending of round 2, I wanted to show you how I closed it off because it is different than round 1. So round 1, I mentioned that's the only time you'll need to slip stitch. So for this round, I currently have 10 stitches. So to make it 12, I will need to remove my stitch marker. And then I will do my last increase. So 2 single crochets. 1 and 2, and then I will take my stitch marker and put it into that last stitch, and that is the end of round 2, and I now have 12 stitches. For round 3, we're going to start off with an increase. So into my first stitch, I'll do 2 single crochets. That's 1, 2. Then I'm going to single crochet into the next stitch, so this one here. And I want to repeat those steps all the way through until I end up with 18 stitches in total for round 3. So for this round, you will end off with a single crochet into that last stitch where your stitch marker is. For round 4, we want to start off once again with an increase into our first stitch. 1 and 2. Next, we want to single crochet into the next 2 stitches. So here's my next stitch. That was once. Going into the next stitch after that. That is 2 times. So now I want to repeat those steps all the way through until I end up with 24 stitches in total for round 4. For round 5, we're going to start off with an increase into our first stitch. So this is my first stitch. 1 and 2. Next, we're going to single crochet into the next 3 stitches. So here's my first stitch. That's my second one. And then my third stitch. And I want to repeat those steps all the way through until I end up with 30 stitches in round 5. As you can see, our circle is now expanding, and when I was first writing this pattern, I actually did one more row of increases, but I felt like he was too round. So what we're going to actually do is just single crochets for round 6 and round 7. So you should still end up with 30 stitches in each of those rounds. I will do those off camera because they're just single crochets, and I'll be back right after that. After 2 rows of single crochets, he's starting to curve down. And now moving on to round 8, we're going to do our last increasing round. So for this, we want to start off with an increase into our first stitch. Next, we want to single crochet into the next 4 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. After this, you want to repeat those steps all the way through until you end up with 36 stitches in total for round 8. For rounds 9 to round 12, you want to single crochet for those entire rounds, so you will still end up with 36 stitches in each of those rounds. After rounds 9 to round 12, we're going to start our decreases. So for round 13, you want to begin with an invisible decrease. So I'm just going into the front loops only. So here is my first stitch. I'm going just through the front. I'm taking this yarn and pulling it through. I want to go into my next stitch after that and do the exact same thing by going into the front loop only. And then I'll take my yarn through. I have 3 loops. I'm going to yarn over and pull through all 3, and that is an invisible decrease. So now I'm going to single crochet into the next 4 stitches. So here's my first one, 2, my third one, and my fourth one. So I'm going to repeat those steps all the way through until I end up with 30 stitches in total for round 13. After your first row of decreases, you can see that it's now starting to curve back in, and I don't want it to curve too much yet. So for round 14, we just want to do a single crochet row, so you will still end up with 30 stitches in total for round 14. For round 15, we're going to start off with an invisible decrease, so just into our front loop only of our first stitch. We have 2 loops. We want to go into our second stitch. We now have 3 loops, yarn over, and pull through all 3. So now you're going to single crochet into the next 3 stitches. So there's 1, 2, and 3. You want to repeat those steps all the way through until you end up with 24 stitches in total for round 15. At this point, you can start to stuff your project, but I'm actually going to do one more row of decreases before I start to fill this up. So for round 16, I'm going to start off with a decrease, and this time it's not going to be an invisible decrease, it's going to be a normal one. So what you have to do is just, you're going into the entire stitch instead of the front loop only. So I'm going to take my hook and insert it into the entire stitch, pull some of this yarn through. I'm going to go into the stitch after that and do the same thing. I have 3 loops. I'm going to yarn over and pull through all 3. So there's really no reason why I do the invisible and the decrease. Well, I personally feel like it makes a slight difference, but honestly, you can still do an invisible decrease and end up with the same thing. But this is just my preference. So I'm going to start off with, well, sorry, I did the decrease. Now I'm going to do single crochets into my next 2 stitches. So that's 1 and 2. I'm going to repeat those steps all the way through until I end up with 18 stitches in total for round 16. I just finished round 16 and I also stuffed my project. So for round 17, it's our last decreasing round and actually our last round. So for this round, we want to decrease into our first stitch. We're going to do a normal decrease. And then you want to single crochet into the next stitch. So here's my decrease. And then I'm going to single crochet. And I'll repeat those steps all the way through until I end up with 12 stitches in total for round 17. Once you finish round 17, you want to cut some excess piece of yarn so we can finish our closure. So what I'm going to do is just take my yarn, and you can see that I cut it off already. So with this loop here, I'm just going to pull my yarn straight through and out. So you can see that if you go this way, you kind of have this weird gap. So you want to make sure you're going the way you would usually single crochet or your decrease. So I'm going this way, and I'm going to take my hook and then insert it into the stitch closest to where I ended off. And I'm going to take some yarn and pull it through. And then I'm going to repeat that a couple more times. So that was 2, 3, 4. Now I'm just going to pull it, and you can see it starts to close just a little bit. So I'm going to continue doing that until it closes all the way up. As you can see, there's still a little bit of an opening. So what I'm going to do is just take my hook and insert it into a stitch. Take some of this yarn, pull it through, just close it up a little bit more. I'm going on the opposite sides. Try not to get the stuffing in the inside. And then just to make it secure, you want to take this loop here, and before I pull it all the way out, I'm just going to insert this part of the yarn into the loop and close it up. And then I want to stuff back the green yarn into that little opening. Once you finish stuffing it, this is what it looks like. So here's the bottom and this is the top. I kind of just smooth it out a little bit just to make sure it's the shape that I wanted. And now we can move on to the horns. For the horn, you want to take your cream colored yarn or a brown if you like, and we're going to start off with a magic circle. Now for this one, I don't use a stitch marker because it is such a small piece. I feel like I can keep count of it in my head, but if you want a stitch marker, please add it. So what I'm going to do is now single crochet 4 times into my circle. As you can see, I did tighten it up to make it a smaller circle because we're only single crocheting 4 times. So that's 1, 2, 3, and before I do my 4th one, I'm just going to close it up a little bit more, and 4. So next I'm going to slip stitch into my first stitch. Going into my first stitch now to do my slip stitch. It's going to be a little bit difficult because it is such a small round. So just try to get your hook inside the stitch. Okay, there, I finally got it. And then I'm going to take my yarn and pull straight through. So that is 4 stitches or 4 single crochets into my magic circle. So now for round 2, I'm going to increase into every stitch. So I will end up with a total of 8 stitches in round 2. That's 1, 2, and I'm going to continue this until I get 8 stitches. After you finish round 2, you just kind of want to push your project to make sure you get the right side you want to show. So once you do that, for round 3, we're just going to single crochet, so you'll end up with 8 stitches in total for round 3. For round 4, we're going to start off with a decrease. So I'm going straight into the stitch. This is a normal decrease, not an invisible one. It's going to get a little bit harder because we're closing this up with just a little bit. So I'm going to yarn over and pull through all 3, and then I'm going to single crochet into the next 2 stitches. So this is 1, if I can get it through, and then another single crochet. And you want to repeat these steps just one more time, so just one more decrease and then the 2 single crochets, and you'll be done with the horn. Once you're done with the horn, it's going to look a little bit messy, but what you want to do is take this yarn, the one that's already inside of the horn, and you want to stick this back in, and that'll just add like it'll be like a little bit of a stuffing, because you don't really need to stuff this, but I don't want to cut it off since I can just add this in. And then if you're going to sew the horns, make sure when you cut off the yarn you leave a little bit of excess, but I'm going to hot glue mine because it's easier. So now with this yarn, I'm just going to pull it out, and later on I'm going to glue it down. So I'm just going to leave this here for now, and make sure you make 2 pieces, of course, and next we're going to move on to the eyes. Before we get to the eyes, I actually want to start off with the hat because I still want to work with yarn. So for the hat, you want to take your blue yarn, and for round 1, you will create a magic circle and single crochet 6 times. I did this off camera because I've already showed you this step with the green yarn and the horn, so I don't want to repeat it too many times. So after you do that, for round 2, we're going to increase into every stitch. So with our first stitch here, we just want to make 2 single crochets into that same stitch. And then you want to repeat that until you end up with 12 stitches in total for round 2. For round 3, we're going to start off with an increase into the first stitch. And then you want to single crochet into the next stitch. And you'll repeat that until you end up with 18 stitches in total for round 3. For round 4, we're going to single crochet into the next 8 stitches. And then you want to increase into the next stitch. So for your 9th stitch, you'll do an increase. Then you repeat that step all the way through. Well, you need to repeat it one more time until you end up with 20 stitches in total for round 4. For round 5, we're just going to single crochet all the way through, so you'll end up with 20 stitches in total for round 5. For round 6, we're going to just remove our stitch marker, which I've already done, and we're not going all the way around because we're just creating the brim of the hat. So for the first stitch, we want to start off with a half double crochet. So I'm going to yarn over my hook and go into my first stitch, pull some yarn through. I have 3 loops. I now want to yarn over again and pull through all 3. So into my second stitch, I want to do a double crochet. So I'm going to yarn over, go into the stitch, pull some yarn through. I have 3 loops, but this time I'm going to yarn over and pull through the first 2 loops. And then I'm going to yarn over again and pull through the last 2. So I want to do a double crochet 2 more times into the next 2 stitches. So here's my next double crochet. And then my last double crochet. Okay, so now we want to do another half double crochet. So I'm going straight into the stitch. I have 3 loops, yarn over and pull through all 3. And then lastly, we're just going to create a slip stitch into our last stitch here. So I'm just going to put my hook in and pull all the way through. And that is just going to create the brim of the hat. So we're actually going to sew this one on. So what you need to do is cut off some excess piece of yarn and make sure you have enough to sew the entire hat. So I'm just going to cut this much And then now we can move on to the eyes. For the felt portion of our project, I have already pre-cut mine out because I felt like it was already self-explanatory. All you need to do is take your blue felt and cut out an M and a U for Monsters University. And for the eyes, you can see here that I have a larger white round, a green, a black, and then we go back to a smaller white. And I didn't make mine too big. You can make yours however big you want, but for the M and U, it will need to be a little bit smaller because the hat is kind of small. So in the next few clips, you're just going to see me attaching everything, and then we'll be done with our little project. Before I close this up, I just wanted to mention, if you want the hat to puff up a little bit more, what you can do is just take some stuffing and put it in the inside of the hat, and then close it back down, and then you'll just stitch around this brim, and that way it will stick up a little bit more. So I'm gonna go ahead and sew this off camera so I can finish this up. Once you have everything attached, you have your very own Mike Wazowski. I didn't make this one a keychain because I already have one on my bag, so this one's just going to be added to my collection. If you did want to make yours a keychain, all you have to do is add a little key ring here, and you have your very own Mike Wazowski keychain. Again, I didn't add any legs or arms to this because I felt like he was cute the way he is like this, but if you do add legs and arms to yours, please let me know how you do that in the comments below. And I think that's about it for this guy. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.